You won't believe how many people are currently walking around with a mental blueprint of a mansion, while they're actually living in a shack made of tomorrows. We've all been there, haven't we? That suffocating gap between who you are and who you know you could be. You've got the ambition of a lion, but the daily habits of a sloth. You dream of the gold, the respect, and the impact. But when the alarm goes off, your thumb finds the snooze button before your brain even wakes up. You're ambitious, but you're lazy, and that is the most dangerous kindness trap of them all. Now, let's talk about a young lad named Amir. At 25, Amir was the picture of potential. He was strong, he was healthy, and he had a tongue that could spin gold out of thin air. He'd sit in the village square, leaning back against a shaded wall, telling anyone who'd listen about the empire he was going to build. One day, he'd say, his eyes wide with a manic kind of hope, "My fields will be the envy of the valley. My crops will shine like literal gold. People will travel for miles just to ask for my advice." And the villagers, they believed him. They saw his fire. But there was a rot at the center of Amir's ambition. While the other farmers were out before the first gray light of dawn, their boots caked in mud and their backs straining against the earth, Amir was still under his covers. He wasn't just sleeping, he was dreaming. He was addicted to the mental image of success, but he had a physical allergy to the sweat it required. When the sun hit its peak and the village men were wiping grit from their eyes, Amir was still sat in the shade, talking. "I'll get to it later," he'd say. "The soil needs to settle, or I'm waiting for the perfect weather." He was a master of the sovereign excuse. He thought he was being clever, but he was actually paying the highest empathy tax possible. He was lying to his own soul. One evening, his uncle, a man whose face was etched with the deep lines of 50 harvests, walked onto Amir's land. He didn't see golden crops. He saw a graveyard of potential. The soil was rich, but it was dry, cracked, and empty. "Amir," the old man said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "why is this earth screaming for a seed? You talk like a king, but you live like a ghost." Amir just laughed it off. "Uncle, don't fret. I'm starting tomorrow. My field will be the best the world has ever seen. Just you wait." The uncle didn't argue. He'd heard the tomorrow song 1,000 times. Instead, he reached into his heavy coat and pulled out 2 small, distinct bags. "These aren't ordinary seeds, Amir. These are the seeds of your destiny. This first one, this is the seed of ambition. If you plant it and water it with daily action, it grows into a tree of wealth and shade. But this second one, this is the seed of laziness. If you plant this, it grows without any help at all. It spreads like a fever, choking out everything else until the land is a wasteland." He dropped them into Amir. "The future isn't a destination, son. It's a choice of which seed you feed." Amir looked at the seeds. In his mind, he was already sitting under the great tree of ambition. But when the next morning came, the kindness trap snapped shut. He felt a bit stiff. He felt a bit tired. "I'll plant them tomorrow," he whispered. Days bled into weeks. Finally, out of sheer boredom and a bit of guilt, he walked out and shoved both seeds into the dirt. "Let's just see what happens," he muttered. "I can always sort it out later." He went back to his shaded wall. He went back to his gossip. He went back to the architecture of stillness. But it wasn't the powerful stillness of a master, it was the stagnant stillness of a swamp Mons Pesed. One morning, Amir finally walked out to his field, and the sight hit him like a physical blow. The laziness seed had been busy. Thick, thorny weeds had exploded across the earth, twisting and crawling like green snakes. They had carpeted the soil, suffocating the life out of the land. And there, in the middle of the chaos, was the ambition seed. It was a tiny, pathetic, shriveled shoot, gasping for a single drop of water that never came. It was dying. His uncle appeared behind him, looking at the mess. "This is your life, Amir. Ambition is a delicate flame. It needs your breath, your sweat, and your constant protection to stay alive. But laziness is the wind. It doesn't need you, it just needs you to do nothing, and it will destroy everything you ever dreamed of. You wanted to be respected. but your tomorrow has already stolen your today. Amir fell to his knees in the dirt. He touched the dying shoot, and for the first time, he didn't have an excuse. The price of access to his dreams had been paid in wasted hours, and now he was bankrupt. He spent that night staring at the ceiling, the December fear finally setting in. He realized that if he didn't move now, the weeds would eventually move into his very soul. Before the sun even dared to show its face the next morning, Amir was in the field. His hands bled as he ripped at the thorns. His back screamed as he hauled water from the well. It was brutal. It was exhausting. It was the empathy tax being collected in full. But he didn't stop. He watered that tiny, dying shoot. He pampered it. He guarded it like it was his own heartbeat. Over the years, that field did turn golden, but the real harvest wasn't the crops. It was the man. Amir became the sovereign farmer, not because he was the luckiest, but because he was the most disciplined. He realized that laziness is yuan-te, personality trait it's a weed that you have to pull every single day. So, ask yourself, which seed are you watering right now? You've got the big plans, the luxury of absence dreams, and the Heisetus goals. But are you out in the field, or are you still sat in the shade, talking about what you're going to do tomorrow? The world is full of Amir's people with brilliant minds and empty fields. Don't be one of them. The price of access to greatness is paid in the boring, quiet, early morning hours when no one is watching. Stop being too good at making excuses and start being truly good at making progress. If this story hit a nerve, if it made you want to get up and pull a few weeds in your own life, then do us a massive favor. Hit that like button and share this with that one mate who is always going to start next week. You might just be the uncle they need to wake up. Subscribe to join our community of sovereign minds, and let's keep growing. Leave a comment with the word action if you're planting your ambition seed today. The sun didn't just rise on Amir's field the next morning. It rose on a different kind of man. You see, the hardest part of killing laziness, ISNT, the first hour of work it's the second week. It's that moment when the initial excitement of change is worn off. Your muscles are screaming. The blisters on your hands have turned into raw, stinging sores, and your bed feels like a warm, magnetic trap pulling you back into the kindness trap of comfort. Amir stood in the center of his wasteland, the gray thorns of laziness weeds reaching his knees. He looked at the tiny, shriveled ambition shoot. It looked pathetic. It looked like it wasn't even worth saving. His mind, that old, silver-tongued devil, started whispering to him, "Is it really worth it, Amir? Look at this mess. You've let it go too far. Even if you work all day, you won't see a harvest for years. Why not just go back to the shade? At least there, you can still dream of being a king. Here, you're just a beggar in the dirt." This is the empathy tax of the ego. Your own brain will try to protect you from the pain of growth by offering you the poison of later. But Amir remembered his uncle's eyes. He remembered the December fear that had gripped his heart when he realized he was 25 with nothing but a loud mouth and an empty stomach. He took a breath, reached down, and grabbed the first thorn bush with his bare hands. The thorns bit deep. The pain was sharp and immediate. But as the blood trickled down his wrist, Amir felt something he hadn't felt in years. Reality. For the first time, he wasn't living in a mental blueprint. He was living in the now. Every weed he pulled was a no to his old self. Every bucket of water he hauled from the distant well was a price of access he was finally willing to pay. Weeks turned into months. The village gossip shifted. People who used to sit with him in the shade started to mock him. "Look at Amir!" They'd laugh. "The king of the valley is covered in dirt and sweat. Where is your gold now, Amir? Where is your empire?" In the old days, Amir would have stopped to argue. He would have spent 3 hours explaining his strategy to defend his ego. But now, he practiced sovereign silence. He didn't even look up. He realized that the opinions of people who still sat in the shade were a trivial noise he could no longer afford. He had a flame to guard. He had a seed to feed. The ambition tree didn't grow overnight. It was a slow, agonizing process. There were days when a frost threatened to kill it. There were nights when Amir stayed awake in the field, shielding the small plant with his own cloak, shivering in the damp cold. He learned that discipline isn't a switch you flip, it's a maintenance of the soul. One afternoon, as the tree finally stood taller than him, its leaves a deep, healthy green. A young lad from the village approached the fence. He looked exactly like the old Amir, clean clothes, soft hands, and a restless look in his eyes. "Amir," the boy said, "I want to be like you. I want a field that everyone talks about. Tell me, what's the secret? Is there a special ritual? A magic word?" Amir stopped his work. He looked at the boy, then at his own scarred, calloused hands. He didn't give him a life hack. He didn't tell him to manifest his dreams. "The secret," Amir said, his voice deep and steady, "is that there is no secret. There is only the bucket and the thorn. You have to love the pulling of the weed as much as you love the eating of the fruit. If you only love the fruit, you will eventually starve. Because the laziness seed is always waiting for you to fall asleep. It doesn't take a holiday. It doesn't get tired. It is the default state of the world." He pointed to a patch of ground near the boy's feet. A tiny, familiar green weed was already poking through the soil. "You see that? That's your laziness. You can pull it now with one finger, or you can wait until next year and try to pull it with a tractor. The price of your tomorrow is the destruction of your today." The boy looked at the weed, then back at the massive ambition tree. He realized that the tree wasn't a prize Amir had won. It was a vessel of stored effort. Every leaf was a morning Amir had chosen the field over the bed. Every branch was a no he had said to a distraction. As Amir grew older, he didn't become the richest farmer because he had more land. He became the richest because he had sovereign time. Because he had done the hard work early, the tree now provided for him. It gave him the luxury of absence. He could sit in its shade and truly rest. Because he knew that the weeds were gone, he had earned his stillness. When his uncle finally passed away, he left Amir a final note. It said, "The field was never the point, Amir. The point was the man who could tame the field. The land is just a mirror. If you are a king inside, the earth will eventually bow." So, as we look at the horizon of this story, I want you to look at your weeds. What are the things you're allowing to grow because you're too kind to your own laziness? What is the empathy tax you're paying to your comfort? The December fear of an empty life is real. But the sovereign solution is even more real. It starts with one weed. It starts with one bucket. It starts with the realization that your ambition seed is currently gasping for air while you're busy dreaming of the harvest. If you've walked this long road with Amir today, it's because your own seed is calling out to you. Don't let it die in the dark. Don't let the thorns win the war. Be the person who is unyielding. Be the person who understands that the price of access to your best self is paid in sweat and silence. The story of Amir didn't end with a full granary or a tall tree. It ended with a quiet truth that many people never live long enough to learn. You see, the village eventually forgot about the lazy boy Amir. They only knew the old master of the fields, the man who walked with a straight back and a gaze that seemed to see through the very illusions of the world. As Amir reached his twilight years, he sat under the massive canopy of his ambition tree. The fruit was sweet, the shade was cool, and the December fear of a wasted life was nowhere to be found. A group of young travelers, having heard of the man who turned a wasteland into an empire, sat at his feet. They asked him, "Master, now that you have everything, what is the most important part of the journey? Is it the harvest? Is it the wealth?" Amir looked at the horizon, where the sun was painting the clouds in deep purples and golds. He reached down and touched the soil, the same soil that had once been choked with thorns. "The harvest is just a side effect," Amir whispered. "The wealth is just a shadow. The most important part of the journey was the internal alchemy. The field was a mess because my mind was a mess. The weeds grew outside because they were already growing inside. The day I pulled the first thorn with my bare hands was the day I became free, not because the field was clean, but because I was no longer a slave to my own tomorrow." He looked at the young faces, their eyes bright with the same restless fire he once had. "You all want the tree," he said, "but you must learn to love the dirt. You must learn to value your own presence enough to refuse the kindness trap of comfort. Laziness is not a lack of energy. It is a lack of sovereign purpose. When you find what is worth bleeding for, the weeds don't stand a chance." Amir realized that his legacy wasn't the gold in his pocket, but the standard of excellence he had set for the valley. He had shown them that a cracked pot can water a garden, and a lazy dreamer can become a king, but only if they are willing to pay the price of access to their own soul. The empathy tax he had paid to his laziness for 25 years was finally settled. He was debt-free. He was whole. He was sovereign. So, as we close this final chapter, I want you to look at your own tomorrow. That word is the most expensive thing you will ever buy. It costs you your health, your dreams, and your very identity. Every time you say, "I'll start later," you are signing a contract with your own failure. Stop the chase. Pull the wind water. This seed. The world doesn't need more Amirs sitting in the shade talking about what they could be. The world needs the version of you that is willing to get its hands dirty. The version of you that understands that the luxury of absence is only earned through the grit of presence. Take a deep breath. Feel the power in your own lungs. You are not a victim of your habits. You are the architect of your destiny. The seeds are in your hands. The field is waiting. The sun is rising. What happens next is entirely up to you. Share this with the Amir in your life, the one who has the potential of a giant, but the habits of a child. Be the uncle who gives them the seeds. Subscribe to the channel, join our community of the unshakable, and leave a comment with the word sovereign if you're pulling your first weed today. Your time is coming. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.